Thank you very much. So, yes, I'm going to be presenting work that was completed earlier this year with my colleagues at the USC Institute for Creative Technologies. And today I'm going to be talking about varied magnitude favor exchange in human agent negotiation. So, as was mentioned, negotiation is becoming a more popular field. There's a lot of good work going on right now. But just to motivate it a little bit for the audience, we're broadly interested in negotiation because it's a very common social task that humans engage in all the time. Everything from, a very casual negotiation like where to go for dinner, or during COVID, I suppose, more what to eat for dinner, to something more formal like how to resolve a lawsuit, to something that could be very structured, like a salary negotiation. So all of these are different types of social interactions that broadly involve two or more parties trying to find some common ground and trying to communicate. Of course, these are also very interesting problems because they have a lot of subtopics that are interesting to people that are interested in studying social interaction. There are questions of sort of timeliness. Is there a protocol that needs to be followed, an unspoken one about maybe alternating who chooses, questions of emotion. In the case of a lawsuit, you might consider that this isn't truly a bilateral negotiation. You're instructing a third party who is going to negotiate on your behalf. There are questions of how to be clear, how to communicate in that scenario. And of course, the main topic of today's talk is questions about reasoning over time. To what extent should you push very hard today to get something you want, and will that have consequences down the road? Should you give ground today to sort of get ground tomorrow? So, of course, these are questions where humans are very good at doing these things. They're interacting in this social way, at least in a casual way. But the virtual agent community has been increasingly engaging in these kinds of things as well, and interacting with humans in these kinds of scenarios. So I'm going to show you a brief video that was a demonstration from Google. Some of you may have seen it before. That was a Google Assistant, and it involves an agent negotiating with a real human over the timing of an upcoming salon appointment.
So how can I help you?
Hi, I'm calling to book a woman's haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd.
Sure, give me 1 second. Sure, what time are you looking for around?
At 12 p.m.
We do not have a 12 p.m. available. The closest we have to that is a 1:15.
Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.?
Depending on what service she would like. What service is she looking for?
Just a woman's haircut for now.
Okay, we have at 10 o'clock.
10 a.m. is fine.
Okay, what's her first name?
The first name is Lisa.
Okay, perfect. So I will see Lisa at 10 o'clock on May 3rd.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Great. Have a great day.
So what can we take away from that? Well, other than the fact that audiences at these tech demos tend to find back-channeling funny, I think we can find out that, this is effectively a kind of negotiation. You have two parties that are communicating information, communicating about preferences over what time, what kind of service. There's information exchange, and eventually at the end, they reach an agreement. So broadly speaking, this is the kind of social interaction that I'm interested in. However, this kind of slick tech demo tends to miss a few things. An interaction like this does not often have a lot of context or memory. If you're going to be calling back, you're going to get the same result. There's a lot of Markovian assumptions here that the interaction is not going to evolve over time. They also tend not to be very individualized. So although your Google Assistant might know your calendar, it's not going to know the other person at the end of on the other end of the line. Not going to know if they're a friend or a stranger or anyone significant like that that should be treated differently. And these tend to be very effective when you're doing something that's a simplistic Q&A, a scheduling, or an information request kind of task. But there's not a lot of higher strategy when you think of formal negotiation about how much to give or take, or anything that you might find in a negotiation textbook is probably not going to be shown here. So the argument is we can do better if our models of human behavior account for some things, including accounting for reasoning over time in particular. So we need agents with social intelligence, a message that's very familiar to this group, but also in particular with sort of temporal social intelligence. So just to back up a little and formalize what I'm talking about here, you can think of negotiation. There's research going on with two agents negotiating each other, but also agents negotiating with humans, which is more what we're looking at. So there's lots of sub-areas to focus on. Agent negotiation tends to be this very structured, rapid, one-shot thing where you're just trying to optimize. There's no cheap talk and everything's formalized. With human negotiation, we can think of it as more free form. Nothing is really set in stone until the end. And of course, you have people that reason about repeated negotiations and questions of trust and reputation. That's what I'm going to be talking about for the rest of this talk. So to bring up just the very most classic example, this is an example of the prisoner's dilemma. Classic problem in game theory and behavioral game theory. You have two prisoners who are being interrogated by the police, and they have the choice of whether to confess and rat on their partner or lie. If they both confess, then they both go to jail. If they both lie, then they both get very light sentences, and of course, one of them can betray the other and get sort of the best outcome for them. So traditional game theory says, okay, the rational thing to do is to have them both confess. Behavioral game theory says, well, okay, that doesn't actually happen all the time in the real world. You get people cooperating. There's a lot of reasons, a lot of good literature on why that would be. But in our case, we're looking on the idea that people are reasoning about the future, about whether they might interact with these people again, whether it's better to sacrifice a little today with the hope of gaining some tomorrow. And that's something that humans think about very well. So first started looking at this as part of the automated negotiating agents competition, which has been a human agent competition where researchers create agents to interact with humans. That's been running for several years. And one of the early questions was we looked at how much people like the agent, which is a bit of a proxy for how much they might be willing to negotiate with them again in a repeated scenario. And so that's what we have on our y-axis here. And our x-axis is basically how well the agents do. And the important thing to take away from this is that the slopes are generally negative. The better you do, the less likely people are to like you, which is meaning you may be sacrificing some value. So to put that more formally, if you have repeated negotiations, and here you can look at these negotiations as this blue and red line as being utility graphs between two sides, well, you might be naively thinking, oh, the fairest thing to do is to split the middle, go somewhere here in this A1, A2 round. But it turns out that exchanging favors by picking, say, I get everything in the first negotiation and then you get everything in the second, is actually more efficient. So you can end up on this Pareto frontier, this most efficient area, as opposed to sort of naively just splitting everything every time. So mathematically, favor exchange is a good thing. Other previous work that has looked at this has looked at the fact that you can promise favors, but then if you betray people's trust and you never return those, that there's a cost associated with that. So here I'm looking at a previous work that had several different types of agents, but there was a betraying agent. Important thing to note here is that there was an actual cost. People were able to detect that betrayal happened, and they punished the other person for that. So the real question that we get to with this work is, okay, people detect betrayal, favors are a good idea, but how much betrayal can you get away with, right? It's one thing to say, okay, you should be nice to people because you're going to do things in the future, but how nice do you need to be? And so we decided to formalize this with the current study. And so we designed 4 agents that were going to negotiate with humans. And we had one of them that did not use favor language at all. And then we had 3 agents that did use favor language. So they requested that you do something good for me now, and then I'll pay it back later. But then we varied the amount to which they actually responded with that. So we had agents that gave the full value of a favor back, that gave somewhat of a favor back, and also ones that didn't give any favor back at all. So those are our betraying agents. And the idea here was to find out whether A, favors were effective in a real context where you'd be looking at multi-issue bargaining, and also if people were able to detect the differences by how much they were getting that favor paid back. So we ran a study on Mechanical Turk, 163 participants, followed basic good practices there, and each person faced one of these 4 agents. The study was run on the Iago agent platform. I'll give a quick view of what the platform looks like. Iago is a web-based negotiation platform. This is what the interface looks like for a user. There's a chat window on the right side where people can talk, free chat about their preferences over several different items, which ones they like better or worse. Of course, they can also express their emotions using a series of emoticons, and that shows up in a fairly simple embodied agent that's visible on the top left. And of course, they can also move things around on our simulated offer table where they can try different deals. So what did we find out? Well, these are our primary results. And what we found was that we were looking at the average agent points over the course of actually 3 back-to-back repeated negotiations. And what we found was that there was a significant difference between the agents that requested favors and the agent that did not. So comparing those 3 to 1, found out that it was effectively a good idea to try and have the agents request favors. These same results presented graphically, what you can see here is that there is actually a trend to the betraying agent being the best of these agents. However, the differences between the 3 blue bars, the 3 agents that did use favors, was not significant. So although you can see that the betraying agent appeared to do the best, there was not a significant difference here, but there was a significant difference between those and the no favor agent. So what it appears is that people actually didn't seem to know when they were being betrayed. They did seem to know when they were having favors requested of them, and that seemed to work out for the agent, but they weren't able to really detect that those favors were never really returned. Now, there's a couple of reasons that we can think of that this might be the case. My personal favorite is from a very old study about placebic information back in 1978, and what that showed was that people kind of tune out. This particular study showed that people were able to cut in line to use a copy machine as soon as they used the word because. And it didn't really matter what they said after that. People would sort of ignore them and let them get away with it. And so that may be what we're seeing here. This is a very complicated domain. Multi-issue bargaining has a lot of things going on. And so these simple signals may prompt people to cooperate, thereby making favors effective, but then they sort of tune out after that, and that they may not be able to process that those favors never get returned. So in short, these results show that people didn't really act as though betrayal occurred. Of course, this was a sufficiently complex environment. Previous results that have found a cost of betrayal have been ultimatum games, certainly not a fully fledged multimodal negotiation. Here, when we had that complex environment, it may be harder to detect or evaluate betrayal. Furthermore, these simple triggers did induce favor behavior. So when the agents asked for favors, people responded. They certainly detected that, and it was effective. And it's important to note that even when I call this a betraying agent, this agent did not do anything that sort of involved rubbing its hands together evilly and saying, ha ha, I betrayed you. It just never really gave you a good deal ever again. So that would probably give us a very different result if we looked at something like that. So the key takeaways here are that favors work. They're an effective technique in human-agent negotiation, not just human-human. And when we're looking at a really complex environment, a real negotiation, not just ultimatum games, they're effective. The magnitude of the returned favor didn't appear to matter. And that fundamentally, this is a non-Markovian problem. People recall what happens in past negotiations. They understand that that's impactful, and it matters. So if anyone is interested in further these results or in the Iago negotiation platform, there's a lot of people that are using it, including the Negotiating Agents competition. And I hope you enjoyed this talk. And if you have any questions, please let me know.